Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry, and on today's show, I'm going to be breaking down 8 reasons why Steelers fans across the world should be very excited about the future of this football team. It's going to be a new era of Pittsburgh Steelers football started here in 2026 with Mike Tomlin stepping down as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers and a new head coach coming in. So before we get into the content today, make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already, if you are excited about the future here in the Steel City. Personally, I am, as you guys probably already know, an optimist when it comes to this football team, and I think there's a bunch of really interesting possibilities about the future of this football club, and I think that there's a pretty decent foundation in place that we're going to be talking about on today's show. So if you agree with me on that, click that thumbs up icon. It helps out the show. It helps out this particular video, and I greatly appreciate your guys' support. All right, so we'll start here with the coaching staff, and the fact that you have an opportunity here to get a new, modern coaching staff here with the Pittsburgh Steelers should excite every single Steelers fan out there. Now, obviously, if you go out and get kind of an older school head coach like Mike McCarthy, then maybe, some of that hope is going to diminish a little bit in this fan base. But I think that this is just an awesome opportunity at this point in time to modernize inside the coaching room there here with the Pittsburgh Steelers and inside the meeting room and, find a new leader for this franchise, somebody that can be the next Mike Tomlin or Bill Cowher or Chuck Noll, somebody that can be here for a decade plus and can be, that next, long-term answer at the head coaching position here in Pittsburgh. And what I want in the new coaching staff here in Pittsburgh is obviously I want somebody that's a great leader of men to be the head coach of this football team, just like Cowher was, just like Tomlin was, just like Noll was. But also in terms of the schematics on either side of the ball, I want to modernize. And on offense, that means under center and play action based offense. You're seeing it with all the top offensive play callers in the game today, guys like Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Brian Johnson there with the Chicago Bears. So all those guys run under center, play action based schemes. And the reason for that, guys, is that it helps out the run game to be under center. It helps out the explosive passing game to marry that run game with a play action game. And, I think that is the new wave of offense in the National Football League that the Steelers should follow, especially because they play in the AFC North where running the football is really at a premium, especially late into the season. Then on defense, I want some sort of match-based coverage scheme, all right? And you're seeing this with the Mike Macdonald defenses that are scouring all over the National Football League. You're seeing it with Robert Saleh's branch of kind of the quarters and cover 6 and cover 8 type of revolution that's going on in the National Football League. It could work with a guy like Brian Flores that does a lot of hot quarter stuff, like whatever that looks like. I just don't want, the kind of bland, kind of cover 3, kind of old school defense we've been seeing from Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin over the last several years. I want somebody that can come in here and modernize both sides of the football from a schematic perspective. Then another reason why I think that there is a big reason for hope for the Pittsburgh Steelers, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, is that the offensive line is finally up and coming here in Pittsburgh. And, if there's one thing that, I appreciate about the final years of the Mike Tomlin regime here in Pittsburgh is that it set up the next regime with a pretty decent foundation of young offensive line talent, and in particular, the right side of the offensive line. Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, Troy Fautano, they really invested a lot of high draft capital in these guys, and they're all studs. They all played great in 2025. And then, there's a little bit more of a question mark on the left side, but I would say Dylan Cook, who's on a super team-friendly deal heading into 2026, looked super promising and he looked like a potential future left tackle of the future here in Pittsburgh. Okay, so I think, going into next year, what I would do is I would have Dylan Cook be the presumptive starting left tackle of this team, and then that would give Pittsburgh options as to what they want to do at left guard. They could bring in, or they could bring back, I should say, the veteran that has been helming that position over the last several years, and Isaac Seumalo. He's still playing at a high level. If you want to bring him back on another 1 or 2 year deal, I would be okay with that. You could also move Broderick Jones to the inside. If Dylan Cook is going to be the presumptive left tackle next year, and I do think Dylan played better than Broderick at left tackle this past year, year, then maybe a move to the inside would be good for a guy like Broderick Jones, who simply just hasn't looked terrific at left tackle in the first year that he was playing on the left side in 2025. I think that, he's got the body type to be able to be a pretty darn good guard. I think that would be an interesting possibility there for Broderick if the team wants to move him inside to guard. Also, Spencer Anderson's been on this team. He's played a lot of left guard for this team when Seumalo's been out with his injuries. You could think about playing him there, or at least having him and Broderick compete for the starting left guard job next year. But honestly, I like Spencer Anderson as a jumbo tight end. I kind of hope that's not the way that they go here. Or they could always sign someone else in free agency, or they could draft a day one starter in the NFL draft. This is actually a pretty decent draft for guard talent, guys. So if you wanted to go out and continue this trend of using high draft capital to go out and get a day one starter at left guard, that is something that this team could absolutely do as well. But the moral of the story here, guys, is that I think this offensive line is set up for success, not only in the short term but also the long-term future. And I think the foundation is certainly there for this next head coach to come in and build his offense with. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. Who will be Pittsburgh's Week 1 starting left guard? Do they bring back Seumalo? Do you think they move Broderick Jones to the inside? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. And this will be the pinned comment on today's show. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Ethos. While I tell you about our sponsor today, answer today's pinned question down there in the comments. And with that, let's have word from our sponsor today at Ethos. And guys, the summer before I started here at Chat Sports, my family unfortunately lost my late grandfather. And as you tend to do when you lose someone that's really close to you and that you love, you begin to think about your own mortality and what that would mean for the people dependent on you if something were to happen. With today's sponsor, Ethos, your family can be protected. If something were to happen to me, I want the last thing the people I love to worry about is being able to pay the bills, so I trust Ethos to keep them protected. And as you probably already know, however, the process for obtaining life insurance can be super confusing or straight up annoying with how tedious the process can be. That's where our friends at Ethos come in. As of March of 2025, Business Insider named Ethos the #1 no medical exam instant life insurance provider. Ethos is an online platform that makes getting life insurance fast and easy to protect your family's future in minutes, not months. There's no complicated process, and it's 100% online. There's no medical exam required, and you just answer a few health questions to get a quote in as little as 10 minutes. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos today. Get your free quote at ethos.com/NFL Daily. It's ethos.com/NFL Daily to get your free quote today. Application times may vary, rates may vary, and a big thank you to Ethos for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. All right, another reason why I think that Steelers fans should have a lot of hope for the future for this football team is that the running back and tight end positions are in a pretty good spot right now, okay? Obviously, you have Jaylen Warren locked up. You signed him to an extension last offseason. He's absolutely fantastic. But you also have options as to what you want to do with the other running back spot. You can bring back Kenny Gainwell. It sounds like he's very open to coming back. He was the team MVP this past year and is super versatile. But also, you could potentially embrace Caleb Johnson, the third-round draft pick out of Iowa last year. Caleb is still a very talented guy, and I think that with a guy like Caleb, he was somebody that came into the NFL still needing to develop in some pretty key areas, specifically pass protection, and then he had to develop a receiving skill set as well. And then also the emergence of Kenny Gainwell kind of, forced Pittsburgh's hand this year and kind of forced KJ to kind of take a back seat. But with Kenny Gainwell slated to be a free agent, it's going to be interesting to see, will the Pittsburgh Steelers elevate Caleb Johnson in his role next year? And then at the tight end position, you got Mount Washington, who is a complete X factor on the offensive side of the ball. You got Pat Freiermuth, one of the best receiving tight ends in the game, in my opinion. And then, Jonnu Smith. I mean, we can probably get rid of his ass this offseason, but you still got a really good starting tight end duo. And then that's not even mentioning Spencer Anderson as a potential jumbo tight end that this team utilized this year, and that the next head coach and the next offensive play caller here in Pittsburgh could be able to utilize moving forward. So I like where we're at from the running back and tight end positions. Then at the wide receiver position, no, it's not a complete room right now, but at least you've got that #1 piece locked up for the long-term future. And I think DK Metcalf, hopefully, with this next offense coming in, is going to be able to use his skill set as one of the premier yak threats in the National Football League, and his big body skill set, and then, pair him up with some really complementary skill sets around him, particularly at wide receiver too. too. It was probably one of the biggest weaknesses, if not the biggest weakness the Steelers had on their roster this year, is that they didn't have multiple legitimate receiving threats that could separate versus man coverage. And I think that this offseason, getting that legit number 2 receiver, and honestly, I think the Steelers are going to get multiple really nice complementary pieces in the wide receiver room to pair with DK Metcalf. And the fact that you have Metcalf locked up for the next 4 years sets you up pretty nicely, in my opinion. But then we talked about the offensive line in the first half of today's video. Now let's talk about the other side of the trenches on the defensive line. And as you guys know, the defensive line is also set up really, really nicely right now. The way that it's set up, got Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benson, Derek Carman, and TJ Watt, all of which are under contract heading into 2026. Now we'll see what happens with Cam Hayward. It sounds like he's going to be considering retiring, especially now that Mike Tomlin has stepped down as head coach. And, obviously he's been very close with Coach T. And then TJ Watt, we'll see if they decide to maybe entertain trading him, because Nick Herbig might be looking to get a new contract extension this offseason. And I do think that you need to, add some depth to this group and stuff like that. But the future of this group is really bright. You got Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig, who are still relatively young. Keanu Benton and Derek Carman are recent draft picks. Same thing goes for Y.A. Black. I think the future of this group is really good. And then Jack Sawyer, even last year as a draft pick on day 3, really showed that he's capable of providing a role to this defense as an outside linebacker as well. So really like where the Steelers roster is at in the trenches. There's a lot of really good young talent, and Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin at the time, really prioritize building up the trenches here in the Steel City, because that's the foundation of your football team. And if you can win on both sides of the football there and both sides of the line of scrimmage, you're a team that can beat anybody in the National Football League. I'm a firm believer in that, and the foundation there is certainly going to be there for the next head coach, whoever that ends up being. Then we get to Joey Porter Jr. in the secondary, guys, and I think that he proved this year that he is a legitimate lockdown number 1 corner, especially in man coverage. Now, Joey is not necessarily the best in zone coverage, but I think he's one of the premier man coverage erasers in the game right now. I mean, he completely shut down Nico Collins in the wild card playoff game, and he shut down a number of number 1 receivers all season long. And frankly, guys, him not being named an All-Pro this year, I'm not even asking for a first-team All-Pro selection. Just give him a second-team All-Pro selection, because he was that good this year. The fact that he didn't make either one of those teams is an absolute joke. But at the end of the day, man, this guy with his long arms, his physicality, his competitive spirit, I think he's going to be, the next great outside corner here in Pittsburgh. And I think we saw just a small glimpse of that here in 2025. And then also, there's a good amount of cap space for the new head coach coming in here to address the needs that do exist here in Pittsburgh. And, we'll talk about those needs here in just a second. But, you got a good amount of cap space where right now you're sitting at a pretty decent spot in terms of the amount of cap space that you have. But now let's talk about some of the needs here before we talk about exactly how much the Steelers will have, where you got to make sure you figure out the quarterback situation, whether that's bringing back Aaron Rodgers, whether that's going younger and, maybe trading for Kyler Murray or bringing in Malik Willis or drafting a quarterback. We'll just have to see how they address that need. You also need a couple wide receivers to pair with Metcalf. You need a number 2 corner to pair with Joey Porter Jr., and then you need a punter with Corliss Waitman slated to be a free agent. And then there's some other needs that could pop up depending on what happens this offseason. You could need a starting defensive tackle if Cam Hayward retires or gets traded. Left guard is something that you're going to have to deal with if you don't want to start Broderick Jones or Spencer Anderson there. You're going to have to figure out what you want to do at running back 2 if you don't want Caleb Johnson at RB2 this upcoming season. Inside linebacker, the team could be moving on from Patrick Queen. If he moves on, you probably need another full-time starter at that spot. You're going to need to decide what you want to do at nickel and free safety, and which one are you going to play Jalen Ramsey at this year. For me personally, I would play Ramsey at nickel, so I think free safety is more likely to be a need for the Steelers this offseason. But like I said, it depends on what the plan is moving forward. And then your needs when it comes to depth on this roster heading into the offseason, you got to get depth at receiver, interior O-line, defensive tackle, safety, corner, and edge rusher, just like every single team does. Every team needs to fill out depth. These are the 6 positions I think the Steelers are going to be prioritizing this offseason. And then when it comes to your resources here, the Steelers currently have about $46.5 million in cap space heading into the 2026 offseason. And guys, that's before all the cuts, all the trades, all the restructures that we're expecting the Steelers to make here. And right now, the Steelers currently ranked 9th among NFL teams in cap space heading into this offseason. So the Steelers will have a bit of wiggle room here to spend in free agency and make some trades and, do some things to continue to build this roster for the future. And then speaking of the future, you've got 12 draft picks in the 2026 NFL draft. And there's a lot of things that you could do with those draft picks. You could use maybe some of those picks to, help trade for a veteran player if you feel like that's going to help you out. But obviously, that's going to allow this roster and Omar Khan and the new head coach to fill out this roster with young talent to build for the future. And, right now, you've got a lot of picks in the first 2 days of the draft. You got 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. Obviously, you get a 3rd-round pick from Dallas in the George Pickens trade. You get a comp pick as well in the 3rd round, or at least you're slated to get one right now. And then you've got quite a few picks on day 3 as well. You got 2 4ths, you've got 2 6ths, and 2 7ths, along with a 5th. And, with all those picks combined, you've got 12 total draft picks to fill out this roster with young talent. And, with the way Omar Khan, frankly, has been kind of knocking, these drafts out of the park, they've done a fantastic job bringing in young talent over the last several years, barring a couple of exceptions. I think that they can do a really good job this year's draft, and that could set the foundation for the next kind of era of winning football here in the Steel City. Not to mention, if Mike Tomlin does return to coaching in 2027, if I know Mike Tomlin, he's not going to be able to stay away from coaching very long, especially if the right opportunity presents itself. Tomlin's going to be back eventually, and when that happens, the Steelers are going to have the opportunity to get a couple more high draft picks for this next regime to build out the future of this Pittsburgh Steelers roster. So, let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. What is your excitement level for the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers? Put it on a scale of 1, meaning not excited at all. This next regime is going to suck. I wanted Mike Tomlin back, all that different stuff, to 10, meaning I can't wait to see what this next regime is going to do. I'm probably a lot closer to 10 than I am 1, guys, but let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for our first Steelers Talk video of the day. Later today, guys, I'm going to be getting you guys another video with the latest surrounding the head coaching search surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers here, guys. So if we get any updates today on the coaching search, I'll make sure to include that in our PM video that will be coming out this evening. So make sure you click that subscribe button and then turn on those notifications as well so you know when that next video comes out.